Howdy, good morning. Today we're going to talk about rhetorical devices. Now, if you're here trying to pass your English class, this is specifically going to be working on Latin rhetorical devices. So some of the examples might not be the same. I don't know, I'm not an English teacher, so you're welcome to watch anyway. So let's just talk about what exactly is a rhetorical device. So a rhetorical device is just a way that a speaker can convey information to you. So it's trying to get a goal. So maybe it's trying to get you to feel a certain way. Maybe the speaker is trying to get you to do something. It can be spoken or it can actually be written. So all of my examples today are from Virgil's book, the Aeneid, mostly because in our class of Latin 4 and Latin AP, this is what we will be talking about this year. So our first one is synchysis. So this is when you have an example of an interlocking word order. So your words will not follow the great pattern of a squeaky wheels and a furry cat. That makes sense to us as an English speaker. But synchysis has an ABAB word order. So if you look down at my example, you'll see a squeaky furry wheels cat. Now in English, that does not make any sense at all. You're like, wait, is the wheels furry? Is it a wheel cat? But in Latin, you can always see what's being modified based on what case it is. So a lot easier to do in Latin than it is in English. So in this case, the squeaky wheels and the furry cat go together, and it's not just a squeaky furry wheels cat. Our next one are very similar. We have metonymy and synecdoche. Now, metonymy is an example of when you are substituting a name for something else. For example, if all of a sudden you are watching the news and you'll hear, oh, we got the latest news from the White House. The White House is an inanimate object that does not talk to you. That does not mean that the White House itself has grown a mouth and started talking to you. The White House is an example of the president. That's what we are referring to. Now, synecdoche is very similar, except instead of it being a totally random object, like a White House symbolizing the president, it's a part of a whole. So if you bought a new car and you drive it up to your friend's house, your friend might say, hey, those are some nice wheels. Now, your friend could be actually just talking about the wheels of the car if that's what your friend likes to do. But it also could be an example of synecdoche, where the wheels are actually referring to the whole car. Syncope. So when you start doing advanced Latin, you start seeing words in syncopation. So what I mean by syncopation or syncope, when you are looking at poetry, you'll see that either syllables or sounds are omitted. It's done so you can fit all 6 feet, either following dactyls or spondy, in a line. When the example I think of is in the great extended simile that Virgil gives in the Aeneid, where Aeneas is comparing the city of Carthage to all these bees. And they use the word venientum, but it's supposed to be venientium. Again, that would have too many vowels and really mess up with the whole feet and dactylic hexameter thing. You also see it where your normal indicative verbs now look like they're infinitives, and you're like, wait, what is happening? And it's like, no, it's fine. Our next example is anaphora. Anaphora is when you just start a sentence or clause the same way multiple times in a row. So my example is, I saw many dogs, so many cats, and so many unicorns. The so many is an example of anaphora. Asyndeton. It's when you are lacking conjunctions in between a part of a sentence. So the most famous example is by Julius Caesar when he said, Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. You could say, I came, and I saw, and I conquered. He's just sort of missing a conjunction. This is opposite of polysyndeton, is when you have too many conjunctions. So asyndeton is a lack of conjunctions, and polysyndeton is an excessive amount of conjunctions. We got another good one, pleonasm. I consider this the stating the obvious one. So pleonasm is using more words than necessary to give meaning. So an example of this is to taste with his tongue. Yeah, that's how you taste things. You taste with your tongue. I don't need the word tongue in there. If I said I tasted some cake, you know I used my tongue to do that. It is not necessary. So As we talked about Synchysis, which is the interlocking word order, so the ABAB, the chiasmus is concepts that are repeated or modified in a reverse order. So it's ABBA. So instead of saying a squeaky wagon furry cat, I now have a wagon cat furry squeaky. The furry is still referring to the cat, and the wagon's referring to the squeaky. So it's going in an ABBA order. So that's what chiasmus is. Synchysis is the ABAB, chiasmus is ABBA. Now we have simile and extended simile. Simile, you probably have learned in your elementary school classes, which is the idea of comparing something using like or as. For an example, this video is like a short tree. Now an extended simile is like a normal simile, but more intense. So a simile just compares two unlike things. Again, this video is like a short tree, but an extended simile is one that goes on for too long. It compares a whole story. My example, which I will read because I spent time writing it. This video is like a short tree that blows in the wind. Once planted by a lowly farmer, it lives by itself in front of a deep forest full of large trees. The birds look over the short tree and flock to those with greater foliage. Yes, that is an extended simile. An extended simile that's famous in the Aeneid is when Aeneas compares the workers in Carthage to a bunch of bees. Hysteron Proteron. Did I say that wrong? Probably. It's just reversing the logical order of ideas. When I think of one, I think in the Aeneid, in the line, Aeneas ate at fastigas suspicit urbis. And it says, Aeneas said, and looked up to the top of the city. Now, it kind of goes in reverse order. In context of the Aeneid, normally Aeneas would look up at this city and then say what he was going to say, mostly because what he was saying is in context that he would have seen it after he looked up at it. So you can't really say what you saw when you looked if you didn't look first. So it's just the opposite order of what you would think. Hyperbole. Exaggerated statements that are not meant to be taken literally. You can find many examples of this in the Aeneid, mostly because Virgil likes to say, raises something to the stars all the time. Now, in the line I have here, we have Laocoon raising terrible shouts to the stars. Now, that's an example of hyperbole. His shouts are not actually being reached in the stars. But this is an example of hyperbole, just an exaggeration to get his point across. Now you know, these are some pretty intense screams. The next one is Tmesis. Hold on.
Tmesis.
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 Well, that's a new one from my vocabulary. So, tmesis is the intentional separation of a single word into multiple words. For example, in the Aeneid, you'll see in Book 2, they'll use circumdati. It's one word, circumdati, it's like to surround, but now it's separated not only in the same line, it's in two different lines. When my compound word's been separated, that's a tmesis. Add that to your vocabulary. Hendiadys. Hendiadys are two words that are connected by a conjunction that normally wouldn't be there. Now you might wonder, how's the difference between this and polysyndeton? Polysyndeton usually has a lot more conjunctions than just one. So when I think of this, you can have the line voci iraque. Now, it literally says, voice anger, which talking about in an angry voice. Personification. That's just giving human characteristics to things that aren't human. So if I were to call my Dr. Pepper a loving Dr. Pepper, which they are because they're amazing, that's an example of personification. A Dr. Pepper cannot be loving because it's not human. Framing. Framing is just an example of a line that begins with a verb and ends with a verb. So if you have a sentence that begins with a verb and ends with a verb, you can call it framing. And that's it. Here are some of the basic rhetorical devices. Let me know what's your favorite down below.